Are we all muted on the stream? We can go public now. Yeah, I'll leave it. It's okay. Ralph live.
Okay. In that case, welcome everybody to the first Derby Homes Board meeting of 2023. And if it's not too late, to wish Happy New Year to all of you. Just to introduce, in case we don't know, we've got for his first board meeting here, Andrew Grover, the lead procurement manager. So for Andrew's benefit, can we just go around the table and online and do a quick introduction of who we do? If I do the online ones first, Lucy.
Hi, I'm Councillor Lucy Kerr, and I'm also one of the vice chairs. I knew there was something else I had to say.
Shiraz.
Yeah, Councillor Shiraz Khan, board member from Derby City Council.
Completed the council, Jerry.
Evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Jerry Pearce, Ward Councillor for Chaddersden.
Ian. Muted Ian. Muted Ian. Muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Hello, Andrew. I'm Ian MacDonald. I'm an independent board member and I chair the audit committee.
My case, chair of the board, surely you'll know.
You know, Jen now.
Board member.
I am Shan Shepherd, independent board member and chair of governance.
Councillor Roy Webb, cabinet member for adults, health and housing.
I know Ian Ford.
I know everyone.
You know,
Ian Fullinger, I finance strategic housing at the council.
And I'm Dennis Rees, I'm a tenant OBE.
and only one left is Bob, I think.
And I'm Bob McDonald, and I'm vice chair of the board. I'm also a customer representative on the board.
Okay.
Just realised you look like Lolo, the Teletubby tonight.
You've seen my act, have you? I'm not wearing this again.
Done the welcomes. It's from Rachel North, but he is kindly stepping in ably. Have we any other apologies?
Sorry, be able to make.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. No late items as far as I know. Declaration of interest, anything that's not down there?
Jack, there was a late verbal.
A late verbal.
In confidential.
Of course, yes. Which brings me on to announcements from the chair. And the first one is, well, to say I was taken by surprise in December, having the usual operational board meeting, and something cropped up under any other business, which actually took me and everybody else by surprise. Dennis said he was retiring. Something which I didn't think we'd ever hear. I thought, Dennis, we'd have to carry you out because of your long involvement with Derby Homes and with social housing. But you said you'd had enough. You wanted to go. I think you were going while the going was still good and you're still capable instead of suffering. And I think we all respect that decision, even though you will really be missed. Dennis, I just don't know how to sum up what you've done for Derby Homes and for social housing. The common joke is that OBE stands for Other Buggers Efforts. In your case, that's certainly not true. Everything you've done has been done by yourself in your own inimitable style. There can only ever be one Dennis Rees. You've been chair of this board, you've served in the operational board, you were a tenant board member, you were chair of the NFA. Everybody in social housing who's been around for a time recognises and respects what you've done. It's been absolutely fantastic and you will really be missed. And we just wanted to mark it in a small gesture. So Dennis, if you'd like to come up and shall I come to you? I think that's easier. And give you this little bit of glassware there that you can display to show our small recognition of everything you've done. Because we can't mark everything.
No.
Because people who know Dennis knows he says it as it is. The number of times he's said, this is crap. and he's probably right.
It is.
Yeah.
The problem is, I mean, people don't realise that I'm 88 in 18 days.
At that point, we're all supposed to go, you're not. No way.
But he says I haven't changed. I don't
I
know.
think that's true, then she hasn't changed.
So thank you very much, Dennis.
Yeah.
And all the
A
best
pleasure.
in your retirement.
Yeah.
And
Very good. Well, I'll be watching you on Facebook.
I'm sure you will, yes. I'm sure you'll be commenting whenever
Yes.
whenever necessary. Yeah.
I'm retiring, same as law, you see.
Oh,
I did say to Dennis he could go now, but he said he'd quite like to stay for his last board meeting.
I think a round of applause is. Dennis, I'll just say, I'm so glad I lied to you.
Well, I'm so glad you recruited me. It's only through you and Derby City Council who set up the customer panels, else I wouldn't have been here to start with.
You've done so well for 2 hours a month, mate. I'm grateful.
Not for that, did he?
He did. In between his badminton at the time.
Right, I've got one other announcement from the chair, and that is just to update on something from the last board meeting. Chairs and vice chairs met on the 9th of December to review Maria's midterm review on her towards her review of targets. We agreed that substantial progress had been made on all targets. There is a copy of the review documents which will be circulated to all board members. Okay, moving on then. Are there any statements from members of the board? No. Okay. No questions have been submitted. So, Bob, committee chair's feedback.
The operational board.
Yeah.
Well, the week started at 6 o'clock, and guess what, guys? It finished before 8 o'clock. So that was a big bonus for us.
Another round of applause.
Under chair's announcements in the minutes from the operational board, it says the operational chair would like to thank, well, actually, it says trail, I think that's trial agenda items in terms of the way we do things and time slots and stuff like that. And then operational board forward plan, we considered the new forward plan for items for March. We advised the damp and mould report will be presented at next operational board, and that's very timely as well because it's that time of year and it's a very hot topic to say. And I have to say, the next sentence says the operational board requested for grounds maintenance report to be added to March's meeting on the forward plan. But as I sit here today, I can tell you, grounds maintenance have carried out the first cut of the year. 2 days ago. So I think it was only fair to say well done to grounds maintenance team for doing that. I thought at first it was just something going on outside, and there they were. And I believe the depot was done today.
Yeah, it looks very neat and tidy, Bob.
That's yeah. And I think the rest of it's we looked at a community action grant funding request. We approved a further grant of 20,000. And I think the next meeting, I believe, is the 9th of March, unless anybody knows anything different.
But that's true, and the formal grounds maintenance update will be presented to operational board at that date.
But pleased to say, at least the first cut's taken place. What is it that says first cut's deepest? Yeah. Any questions, anybody? Thank you.
Just to add, as it says on the agenda, there was a slight difference in the agenda in that it had to be formally considered at the operational board whether there were any escalations up to the board.
Oh, yes, that's true. Yeah.
And this time it's decided that there weren't any.
That's right.
Which is good news. Does anybody want to discuss any items from part C? In that case, we'll move on to part A. Minutes of the meetings. There are 2 sets of minutes. We'll do them in the order that they are in here, just for ease of going through the papers, even though probably it might have been more logical to do the shorter one first. But if we look at the main board meeting starting at 6 o'clock, as usual, if we could just go through these, first of all, page by page for accuracy. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Just for accuracy, Chair, I've just noted in 22.139 around grounds maintenance. Review will be presented to operational board in February. We've had to change the date from the February operational board to March now, so we ought to retrospectively update those minutes.
That's not technically a correction because that is what was agreed at the meeting.
Oh, sorry.
We'll put that in as a matter arising to get it updated.
And I
You're
think-
quite correct.
And I think we've got the date wrong, there's 22nd of September as well.
Yeah.
That was it, Chair.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Right. With that, that one addition or amendment, can we then go back to see if there's any matters arising other than one that Michael's just raised? Again, page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, no matters arising that won't be picked up. Going on then to the extra board meeting, the one that started at 5 o'clock. Again, we have the minutes here. So for accuracy, page 1, 2, and 3. Take there was true record then, and I don't think there are any matters arising. They were all picked up later. Okay, thank you. Moving on then to the action monitoring. Well, the first one I've just given the verbal update, and the others are complete, and therefore greened out. Moving on then to A4, Maria.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My report to this board meeting is, in the first part, giving a high-level exception report on our progress against the delivery plan targets for 22-23. In paragraphs 4.3 to 4.7, I've given a summary of how I'm viewing our progress against the 4 key outcome areas that we've adopted from the City Council. I don't intend to read them to you. I'm just really happy to take any questions if anybody's got any on the commentary in between 4.3 and 4.7. Is there anything?
Yeah.
Can I just point out at 4.6, resilient city, it's something that's come up in conversation recently, and Carl mentioned to me this week. Could we look at maybe changing the wording on these from tenant-based to customer-based, in line with customer first? And it's more user-friendly, and we are customers, and I think maybe this is the time to put it in a minute.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
It's just throughout the whole of the documents. There's other examples I'll come to later.
Dennis is smiling, and I know what he's smiling at. I don't know how many times in Dennis's 28 years and my working alongside him, how many times we've changed it from customer to tenant, back to customer, and we'll go back to tenant again.
And even your other organisations still refer to as tenant. But I just think it's more user friendly.
The only thing I would ask that we consider, Bob, is not all of our customers are tenants.
No, that's true.
Because we also deliver services to applicants on the housing register, to people who reside at Milestone House. Leaseholders can technically be referred to as a tenant within the language. But since we took on additional services, we do deliver more than to just tenants.
I get that, yeah.
So how do you want to play it? Jen?
Is it worthwhile, if we haven't got one already, writing a kind of Derby Homes tone of voice and language use document to actually define both and work out when and how it's appropriate to use them to shut things?
I think it's a great idea, Jen, and if you don't mind, can I steal that idea and take it away to doing our piece of work?
As long as I get a flashing sign, have it credited me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, again, if that's something I can help with, let me know.
I think after the help you've given us with the digital strategy, if we could push it past you for you to give us your comments, that'd be fabulous. Thank you, Jen. Is there anybody else? I just want to clear this up though, Bob.
Yeah, no, I'm getting appreciate.
Yeah.
Customer, tenant, customer quite kind of to me encompasses everybody that we deal with.
Yeah.
Well, it might be that actually having a wider ranging discussion around our customer and tenant, the only words that we want to be using, or there are others that we want to use, and maybe park it and bring it back, just because, you know, that it's quite intricate, our audiences and stuff.
Should we leave it as it is for now and pick it up into the?
No, just I just wanted to discuss.
You happy with that, Bob?
Yeah, yeah.
If we leave it pending further discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the council are using the word citizen now very strongly through a lot of their policies and documents. And I think there's pros and against on everything, isn't there?
Yeah.
For me, it's about who are your audience, who are you talking to,
Yeah.
and do they feel included by the way you're addressing them? That's the way I think we need to have the conversation.
Absolutely.
But thanks for the input on that. I'm circling the word. No more questions on those, great.
No.
So I then go on in the report just to give the board the formal outcome on the coroner's inquest that was held last December. I don't think there's any need for me to go into any detail. It's summarised in the report. Jan?
I just wanted to ask, I wasn't aware of this, so I don't want any details or anything, but just under the financial bit, it says about the 50% of the legal costs that we're required to contribute.
Yeah.
And I just wondered why that was without going, I don't know if this is the appropriate time, why that was, but also what the amount actually was as well.
I'd have to come back to you on the amount because I haven't actually seen that yet. But along with the council, I took the decision, supported by Rachel North, that we would share legal representation through the same barrister. It's not always appropriate to do that because sometimes there might be a conflict between the two parties. But on this occasion, because of the respective roles, and this is rolling it back to 2010, when the incident took place, the management of the housing register was at that time sat within the council, where Derby Homes did allocations and management. So it was a very difficult case, unwrapping it back. And the fairest way of dealing with the legal costs and the barrister's advice and representation on this was to go 50-50. I'm happy to confirm the final cost to Derby Homes to board members as and when I get an invoice through. Not had it yet.
Okay, carry on.
And then over the page, paragraph 4.1, slight typo. It's not Derby New article, it's Derby News article. Derby News being an independent media outlet that operates in the city. On the 8th of January, the editor published an article in relation to new build undertaken by Derby Homes. The insinuation was that the new build wasn't being handled in a competent manner. I did a thorough investigation with the support of the officers that manage this area of work, and I was actually quite happy with the detail that I received on all sides. And for me, I think the most disappointing thing was that had the author have taken the time and trouble to ask to have a conversation with me ahead of writing the article, I would have explained to them that we only tackle the most complex sites in the city, the ones that nobody else will touch. And yes, I wouldn't disagree that if you want to look around the city, you'll see other house builders banging houses up much, much quicker. But they're not with the same access problems and planning constraints and everything else that goes into the bag. The sites that Derby Homes deliver on would not be developed out by anybody else. So it's very, very difficult to compare the speed of delivery. And what did concern me were the allegations of poor project management and misleading reports to the operational board. I think the comments that were made in the article, again, were made without full insight into the complexity of the sites. Also not having the insight that I know officers verbally update operational board of any changes since reports are written. And I can confirm that, although it was insinuated in the article, there have been no breaches of planning policy in any of the sites. The suggestion in the article related to an outline planning permission that had been obtained on one of the most complex. And as you all know, as board members, going for outline planning permission is a sensible approach when you're looking at a site that may or may not work its way through to actual development. I do want to be clear though, as always, there's points of learning. There's points of learning from everything, absolutely everything. And I certainly took note of the comments on the Facebook page. And I've already raised my concerns that we need to be a little better on our communication with residents who live adjacent to some of these sites. We may know what's happening, but we need to make sure that neighbours are updated on a regular basis. So I circulated the article and the report ahead of the meeting. I've answered a couple of queries, but I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Yes, Jim.
Not to do with the article, the comment that you made about the value from public comments related to it. Is there any kind of strategy or policy at the moment about proactively seeking that kind of thing out rather than it just coming to our attention? Because that was the question I wanted to ask. You know, are we because people might not make a complaint, but if they go and look on the Derby Telegraph page or a Facebook page somewhere, you know, I just wondered if there was like a set thing of places that we look at once.
Yeah, in short, the answer is yes.
Yes, Chair.
I don't know if Lucy. I don't know.
Lucy. Lucy, I'm there.
Yeah, no, thank you. Communicating what's happening behind hoardings is something which I think most developers are pretty poor at. And interestingly, I've had very few questions about what was going on the old Ken Ives site on Burton Road, because they didn't put up solid hoardings, but they put up mesh hoardings so that people could see progress and see that there were people working there and that were things happening. So that might be one way of looking at it, though there may be security issues in some locations. But the other thing you can do is to put notices on hoardings. Put a poster up and explain what's going on and have a space that has updates or information, and use that and make sure that the updates are being added. And it's not like down by Osnabrück Square where they've still got the consultation from 2021 up.
Yeah. Just on that point, Lucy, our sites are all protected by open mesh hoarding, so they can all be seen. That's a good start then. I do take your point about, you know, providing the update notices, you know, for people to get a better idea what's going on. I mean, we used to pride ourselves in our link with the local community and the consultation that we carry out, you know, ahead of even going to planning. And I think we recognise that we need to strengthen that a little bit more throughout the build process in terms of that communication with the locals, and also, you know, to thank them at the end of the process for bearing with us as well, you know, because it can sometimes be a bit disruptive.
If I can come back on that locals may not be people who live there, but they may be people who walk past. So you can leaflet drop, you know, streets nearby, but it's the guy who's got off the bus and is walking past to his job that wants to know what's happening. So that's why notices on a site can be useful.
Yeah, I mean, the open mesh helps see.
Definitely.
And to be fair, Lucy, we've always got a dedicated site manager that's on site with the contact details there.
I think I just want to clarify that the comments were more in relation to the lack of activity.
Yeah.
So we just need to understand the context. Roy and I have already had this conversation, so but it was the delays on starts that were more the issue, and we've already picked up and said we do need to communicate predominantly with the people who are sat next to these sites, thinking, why is nothing coming out of the ground? But we're going to address that.
Yeah.
Ian.
Thanks, Chair. I think the point Maria made about all these sites that we're dealing with are difficult sites is a very important point, and I think it's important to convey that to tenants and customers, maybe by way of newsletter, because I could see how someone who had no idea that these are all difficult sites might think that some of the timescales that were reported were quite long, were longish in regard to what might normally be the case. But when you know that these are difficult sites and they're encountering issues that wouldn't normally be encountered, then you can see why perhaps they take longer than normal. But if you don't know that, if that's not communicated to you, whether it's because you don't ask or just know you just are unaware of it, then you could feel that some of these sites did take longer in relation to what a site would normally take. But once you know of the problems that that particular site has, or these sites have in general, then it's easy to understand why the timescales are the way they are.
Okay.
Thank you. Just wanted to say, as a board member, I actually feel quite reassured with the amount of information that we get, because kind of like not living in the area, I don't see the local press and stuff. And when I got it through, I was thinking, well, how can anybody think that? Because we get all that detailed appendix information. It did make me think, oh, when I look at that, maybe I should be checking back just so that I've got some kind of reassurance as well myself. But on the CMIS app, it doesn't keep previous board information. So I can't look at November's reports. So that's something that we may be, because it's sometimes useful to be able to go back.
Just the app.
It's CMIS, you know, and CMIS you download.
So you can't look at any history.
No,
Thanks
for raising that.
Yeah.
So because it is sometimes useful to go back to a report or an appendix.
Just to clarify though, on the CMIS system that you can access through your laptops, you can go back to time immemorial.
Okay, so I can always look up on there as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's how I did a lot of the investigation.
Yeah. But yeah, as I say, as a kind of like the information we get as board members, and I think is really detailed in those appendix. So thank you for that, Sean.
No worries.
Just on that, Jan, I think one of the things that the author was unaware of the verbal updates that were given at operational board meetings, because obviously the papers are produced quite well in advance. If of course he bothered to look at the YouTube things, then he may have got the correct thing, but why let facts spoil story?
Just, I mean, look, rounding it off.
Hang on, Ian's because
it's new.
Ian?
Oh, sorry, no, I've simply forgot to delete my hand.
Okay, right, okay, carry on.
I mean, just to round it off, I think we should look at these things as healthy. I don't think there's any harm done having a bit of a deep dive. I always kind of take the media interest as coming at it from a different angle. And clearly we do need to do a little bit more in terms of talking to people around our sites. So it's not all bad.
Okay.
May I just emphasise that it's not all bad, because it says that Derby City Council, Derby Homes, is building new houses, and there's such a lot of negativity about new social housing not being built, that the fact that they're talking about social housing being built is immediately positive.
Okay, that's a very positive way of looking at it, Lucy. Thank you. Maria, anything else to add?
Nothing else from me.
Nothing else for you? Okay. Michael.
Thank you, Chair. Finance update, 5 topics to cover this time round. 3 of them often noting. So if I start on those 3 to start with to see if there's any comments, and then I'll go on to the 2 where it requires a decision stroke approval from the board. So the first one is to note our latest management accounts forecasts as at the end of December is we're now forecasting at a break-even level for this year. And you may recall that we was forecasting a loss of just over £600,000 at the start of the year. And the reasons for the variances are highlighted in the report. Was there any queries on that particular area at all? Okay, thank you. The other one is another technical one, really, is just to note some budget refinements that we've made, relatively minor ones, that we've made during the year as part of our routine budget monitoring. But because of the values, with them being over £100,000 in total, they have to come to the board for noting. So any queries on those? Thank you. And the other one is to note an update on the Derby Homes pension scheme. And actually, this is quite positive that the March 22 position is showing the scheme is well 104% funded, which in layman's terms means that the assets are greater than the liabilities. So that's always positive. And also that the wider Derbyshire County Council scheme, the overall scheme, is also fully funded as well. So that's actually very positive. And the employer contributions for the next 3 years, although they've changed in roundabout terms, it equates to the same amount as before. And that's been a real boost when we've been looking to balance the HRA business plan, because we had anticipated an increase in the employer contributions, and that hasn't come through this time round. And like I say, that's helped balance the HRA business plan. Any queries on the pension scheme at all? Okay, thank you.
Roy.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, just a quick one, Michael. They do a 3-year valuation. So the actuarial valuation, has that confirmed this?
This is the
actuarial valuation.
Yeah, this is the results from the actuarial valuation. The Derby Home scheme was 104% funded at March 22, which is the latest triennial valuation that's been done. So it's positive that
I think we've had year-on-year variations on this rather than triannual.
Yes, so I think perhaps I do need to clarify that this is one that sets the long-term strategy and the funding plans of the pension scheme. The one that we have in our financial statements is a snapshot based on a different way of accounting for it, and it sounds daft when I'm saying on this one the scheme is fully funded, whereas as we know on the accounting one, we had a £31 million deficit in March 22, a £41 million deficit in March 21, and I think it was like 20 million deficit the year before that. And that's what, from an accounting point of view, it does go up and down significantly. And I shouldn't dismiss the accounting one, but this is the important one. And basically, it's saying everything is fully funded, which is really positive.
That would make my day.
Can't dismiss it because Derby Homes is technically insolvent because of that pension scheme deficit, but on this particular one, it's a very positive note on there. Okay, thank you. I'll move on to the 2 areas that do require a decision. The first one is I'm recommending a change to our treasury management policy, and you may recall at the last meeting that the board approved an increase to how much we could invest at any one individual organisation from 2 million to 4 million. This time, what I'm recommending is that we have the flexibility of increasing the length of that investment to potentially take opportunities of generating higher interest returns. So just like where we may invest in our own money in deposit accounts, at the minute, the policy allows us to only invest up to 30 days, and I'm recommended to have the flexibility to go up to 12 months. And in the reasons and the pros and cons are listed in the report. Any queries on that particular recommendation?
On that?
Makes sense.
Can we approve that then? Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
And the final request or suggestion for approval is the annual setting of the rents and service charges on the Derby Homes owned properties, of which I think there's just over about 120 or so at the minute. The Derby Homes increase applies from August, and I'm recommending that the board follow the same levels that the council have adopted for the HRA properties, where rents are going to go up by 7% and service charges by 10%, capped at a maximum of £1 per week increase per service charge. And again, I'm recommending the same applies to Derby Homes properties. Any comments on that suggestion?
We've always followed that practice.
Yes.
Lucy.
So I just wondered why from later on, not from the beginning of April. What's the timing?
The August one, sorry, yeah.
August,
Yeah.
yes, sorry.
Yeah, Derby Homes and the council. Well, as a registered provider, you're only allowed to put your rents up once a year, and it's just been history, if you like, that Derby Homes rents have gone up since the 1st of August. I think it's probably aligned to when properties started being acquired by a company. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Yeah. Right, so property update.
Thanks, Chair. Well, the first thing you'll see is the usual new build update we've already mentioned previously in the meeting. First of all, I've given you an update on the sites that are currently coming out of the ground. Pleased to say that the large adapted bungalow at Berwick Close is now completed, and we're working with the new family around the moving date now for that bungalow. The 4 homes at Cumming Street have now got roofs on and windows fitted, and we're commencing the internal fit out, and we're still on schedule to finish that work by the end of March. So that's a challenging timescale for the team to work to from an internal fit out point of view. The 8 homes at Chesapeake, and this is, well, they're all complex sites, but this one in particular, from a levels point of view, and I don't know if Jerry's walked past the site over the last few weeks or months, you'll have noticed that there's been a pretty major structural retaining wall that's been built as part of that project as we've moved along. That, along with some detailed drainage designs to deal with the levels on that particular site, has meant that the completion date for those homes has pushed back from Q1 to Q3 in next year. So I'm notifying you now that that date has changed from the previous update that you'll have had. And we're on schedule to start the 2 larger homes on Whittaker Street immediately after the Christmas just gone. So we're now making a start in earnest in terms of preparing the site for the substructure to go in there. The attached appendix gives you all the details, and honestly, as we've mentioned already in the meeting, if you look through some of the detailed work the team have to do on the sites, in particular from planning permission being granted, you know, from the sustainable earnage drainage being designed, the materials, the boundary, discharging a range of landscaping issues, agreeing the window specification, the surface water discharge, agreeing the drop curbs and the highways. The section 278 has to be submitted to highways, and we await their response. I'm just quoting a number of things, and there's double that amount in there in terms of the complex issues that we do need to deal with. And it's just disappeared off the screen now. But the information is all there for you to have a look at, and as Jan said, it's useful that I provide that level of detail. So I shall continue at each meeting to provide you with the updates. Jerry.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I have walked past. I was requested by a couple of residents. I was just going to say I'll agree with what Marie was saying earlier about. I think it would have been wise on all these sites, even if it's the site manager that's on the site doing the building. There's probably about 6 or 7 houses that affects on Chesapeake where they're actually living opposite a building site, and I wouldn't like it in my house to be looking at that all the time. It might have been worth a knock on the door and saying and explaining it to them. And I think there was 4 or 5 of those that commented on that Derby News site, Maria, that came on. It would have been 10 minutes, to be quite honest, and just telling them what the action is, why it was being delayed, and I think they would have accepted that, and I think there was no problem. But if it can move on from here, I'm more than happy with that.
Can I just say, Jerry, I agree with you on that, and to be honest, I expect our site managers to be on first name terms.
Yeah.
People
in houses that close to one of our sites.
Yeah. I mean, we often form pretty decent relationships with the local community, and to be fair, they're eyes and ears on the site, you know, when we're not present, and often, you know, we'll report any issues back to us. So it's about forming that relationship. You're right, Jerry, just taking that time to provide them with the updates, because once they realise the explanation for the detailed structural civil engineering works effectively on those sites, then they can understand why it's taking so long. You're right, I get frustrated. Some of the sites, it does seem as though it takes forever as a result of these complex issues.
Yeah, no problem at all. Cheers, thank you.
Right. Any further comments on that? Yes.
So there was a typo in 4.1. There's an AE on the first paragraph last slide. AE are now pressing on with the superstructure.
Oh, sorry, that should be we are now
pressing. Well, I wasn't sure.
Thanks,
I had a really quick question. So when I had a look at the list of implications that this report might have, there was nothing related to the environment in that list, and obviously it does. And then when I had a look at reports later on, environmental is considered. What's the reason for it being listed off this?
Each site's got its own environmental issues or issues associated with it. If you look at the...
I meant the report.
The report itself.
John,
yes.
John, I think it was just an error, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Because it's on about 50% of them, the environment. And I think there was some talk earlier about going back to like doing our due diligence for judicial reviews and stuff. We need to be showing more paperwork that we're going through our checks.
Yeah, I'll make sure I pick that up next time now.
Yeah, I think there's a few on the board report on environmental mentioned.
There are. You're moving on to the next big one that's got a big environmental.
No, I meant in that list at the bottom.
Yeah.
No worries.
Right, carry on, Sean.
Okay, moving on, just to update you in terms of the work that we're doing around decarbonisation and the project, the big project that we've got on the go at the moment, working on the 80 cast iron homes at Allington. I'm pleased to report that that project's progressing very well. It includes new windows, new doors, additional ventilation going in, a render system that's got a brick effect to it as well. If anyone's driving down the ring road and queuing at the traffic lights at Spider Island, you'll see the works happening around you, because we have started work on properties that are on that bit of the run now.
And like you say, Sean, the change over the weeks I've been looking at the changes in the start of the development, you know, the changes phenomenal.
It is going to transform that neighbourhood. Yeah, we're getting really positive comments back from the locals, from the customers. Actually, you know, they're really impressed with the way the work's going. And I've drove out there a few times. The ones that have had the insulation fitted, I'm seeing they've got the windows open. It's that warm inside, but at least they're saying that they are noticing the impact on the on heating
There
bills.
was one customer who said, "I've never been this warm."
Never been this warm. And another customer said, I just love it in terms of the look, which means so much to me, you know, that it's making that difference. So really proud of what's going on there. And of course, we've submitted a bid through Wave 2 to be able to complete that work to a further 150 homes in that area. I'm hoping to find out at the end of February, early March, if that bid's been successful, but we're quietly confident that, you know, that we should get something through for that, which is great. And in addition to that, although it's not picked up in my report, there's a lot of good work happening around decarbonisation in other parts of the city. And Ian's team are carrying out some great work to private homes in Mackworth, and we've completed some work, some of our Wimpy 05 flats at Mackworth. So there's a lot going off on this agenda, you know, a lot of money that we're bringing into the city to try and make that difference. So it's not just Derby Homes, the council are doing a cracking job too. Okay.
Yeah, carry on, Sean.
Okay with that. My last and final point really is the vehicle replacement strategy, and I'm just updating you with regards to that. Now, the last time we had a conversation about vehicle replacement, we agreed that we'd try and get as much value as we can out of the existing fleet. and then we take a view at a point that we had to replace those vans in terms of what our choices and our options look like. We've reached a point now where we've got up to 40 vehicles that are going to need to be replaced within the next 12 to 18 months or so. I know that Michael's reports asked for some funding to cover the cost of those.
Yeah, it's in the capital plans later on in the agenda. Yeah,
that's great. And we're at a point now where we've got no option other than to have to replace those. Now, our choices as we stand here at the moment is that we're going to find it really tough to do anything other than commit to more petrol and diesel vehicles as a result of a number of issues. The first and foremost being probably bullet point 2, which is our concerns about the use and range of electric vehicles. They're still pretty new to the market. We've had a number of trials that we're not wholly satisfied with. We're awaiting a trial in the highly rated Ford Transit vehicle, although the range on that, to be fair, is fairly limited. When you take a vehicle and you fill it with stock that you need to carry out and deliver the service, that has a pretty major impact in terms of range. Another big constraint that we face at the moment is that we've got major restrictions in terms of the power supply to the depot. We're absolutely at the capacity. And even on the odd day, there'll be the odd bit that will trip out here and there. And there's absolutely no chance we're able to add any further charging points here without some major infrastructure changes in terms of the supply coming into the yard. As things stand at the moment, we're still within the process of the depot review. So we've not got any real certainty in terms of being able to make that investment at this point. But within the next 6 to 9 months, maybe we'll have a bit of a clearer view in terms of what we can do to try and develop the place that we work from here. So I still think that we're in a position where we're going to need to go for diesel and electric. What we are looking to try and do, though, is try and buy second-hand vehicles. We've successfully done this in the past. By buying second-hand vehicles that are a couple of years old, it means it reduces the period that we're going to need to write those vehicles off, and effectively brings the date a little bit forward for us having to replace those next time round. They're going to need replacing. So for a range of reasons, and all very legitimate ones, for now we're sticking with what we've got and hope to, take a more positive look and view electric vehicles, at some point in the future.
Sorry, just before we have Lucy, can I just clarify that the 40 vans that are proposed here, that's a combination of some really old vans that we've got which are owned, and probably around 20 or so vans that we've got on short-term hire, but in effect have transpired into long-term hire. And financially, it costs us an absolute fortune to hire a van compared to own it and write it off over 7 years. And because we think we're not going to be in a position to get electric vans for a couple of years, that 40 includes the potential to swap those hired vans over to acquired vans. Sorry, Lucy.
Okay, Lucy.
No, that's fine. And I think the report is very clear, and the ambition for going electric is clearly embedded it both in here and in the later finance report, which I really appreciate. Just a thought, and I'm pleased we've been trialling a few vans, because I think that is part of the learning curve. It might have had a little bit more detail about that in the report itself. But I was thinking, do we have any information about the number of staff who currently take a van home with them who would have electric charging that would be accessible to van parking? And that might help us take a step further forward when the time's right. In terms of being able for them to be doing their electric charging overnight, and having a reimbursement system, some smart metering or whatever that would then work with that. We can't be the only organisation where people would be wanting to take vehicles home and charge them from home.
Yeah, I think the short answer on that, Lucy, is the majority of our van driving employees do take them home at night. No, we don't currently have information on whether or not those employees have electric charging facilities at home. But as we move forward, there are going to be some complex discussions and negotiations, I think, with the employees and the trade unions, because I can foresee lots of interest from the trade unions. But all of those things that you've just mentioned, we need to have them as considerations going forward, because it's quite simple, isn't it? if somebody doesn't want to charge a vehicle at home, they'd have to leave it here overnight, which would mean quite a lot of changes to current terms and conditions. And I think Michael wants to come in, it might be aligned.
Well, yeah, just to finish off. The reason why they go home at the minute is because they're starting from their first job. You know, so it's saving that time in not having to come into the depot. If they had to come into the depot to collect a electric van, for example, there is a productivity loss. I think, Lucy, I just wanted to highlight that the whole country, if you like, is waiting for HMRC to come up with a mileage rate, a bit like the 44, 45p that you get for your petrol and diesel for electric type of charging, where you could do it at home and staff would be reimbursed for it. As it stands, because that's not there, it would necessitate the employer to pay for the installation of the electric point. And I know it can be done, and there's a separate meter, and that would be billed to the employer, and only the employer's van, if you like, can go on that van. Well, that's incredibly expensive setup costs. And of course, if and when that employee leaves, we're not going to take that installation out. And it's, well, we probably would have to, because it would be linked to that van. So there isn't really a solution for charging that's practical short term.
I suppose that's really what I was asking, but I think there ought to be a less bureaucratic way of doing it, so that you could, if you put a standard charging point in, your electric vehicle can be charged from it, but you need to be able to meter the charging that's happening and for them to claim that back, and with a handling fee, because obviously they've got it parked on their front, so that we can continue operating much as we are.
Let's Lucy,
but it needs exploring. The advantage is that we can then have the vehicle being charged not on site, and therefore the capacity to the electricity supply capacity onto site no longer becomes an issue.
There is just one minor flaw in that argument.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, most employees that will have a charging point fitted at home will already have their own electric vehicle that they charge at home. So
yeah,
okay.
I think we take all of this, Lucy. Let's take it away. There's a lot of considerations around it. So it's probably a good job that the technology is not quite up to what we need, and we've got a bit more time to think it through.
Okay, I accept that.
Certainly points to consider though there, Lucy.
Would you get up in the middle of the night to switch the charge over?
No. I just won't do it the day because we can use the solar panels.
I think give the recommendation, Sean. I think it's some
Okay. Right. Moving on then, Sean. Again, a slight typo. We have two A6s appeared on there. This should be A7.
It was a test.
Thanks, Mike. Again, this is the regular compliance update for board members. The matrix attached gives you all the information relating to the top 6 areas of compliance. I'm happy with the levels of performance that we've got shown in here. So 9 certificates out of 12,449 from a gas point of view, and you've got all the data and the detail there in terms of how far they're outstanding and the actions that are in place to tackle and deal with those. The same with electrical safety. So there's 25 properties that don't hold one, but you've got a summary there of the work that we're doing to make sure that we're gaining access to those properties. The area of compliance that's got a more detailed update in the comments section is fire safety. And you'll notice there that I'm talking about some new legislation around fire safety. There's the Fire Safety England Regulations 2022, which is one of the regulations that's stemming from the Grenfell disaster. And those regulations came into force on the 23rd of January this year. Now, we've known that these regulations have been coming down the track for about a year now, but we only had the detail in terms of the requirements early December last year. So we've been waiting like a greyhound in the traps, ready to pounce on this when it comes through. And now we've got the detail, we can put in place things like getting the detailed drawings sorted for the building, which we're underway with now. That'll be complete within the next 2 weeks. It mentions on the matrix here, the external wall survey, and it says that it's still to be arranged. That's not the case. It has been arranged. That's an error with this. I sent a couple of versions out. It depends which version you've got on your system. So rest assured, the external wall survey, we've been working on it for the last 6 to 7 months in terms of procuring that survey through an external consultant, and we've been promised that that survey will be with us by the end of January. Yeah. We've got the inspection regime in place. I'm inspecting the communal fire doors every 3 months, and we've got a regime in place where we're inspecting the individual flat doors every 12 months. Claire's team's working hard on some of the tenant information that's required to meet this, and we're close to wrapping that sort of detail up now. And we've now we've got the detail, being able to order the right size interluminous, what's the word for it? Glow in the dark signs. I'll say it. The glow in the dark signs that go on each floor, and that's actually being tied in with the redecoration of the internals also at Ruthermead House. This only affects Ruthermead House. That's the only building that's in scope for this regulation, and we're in close communication with Derbyshire Fire Rescue Service, and we have been for the last 8 or 9 months or so. They're happy that we get this information all there, finished and with them actually by the end of March, but we hope to achieve that much sooner than that. So we're absolutely on the board with this one. And we're also talking to the council about understanding their role of the accountable person. There'll be a range of other legislative issues that will start to drop through over the course of the next 12 months in terms of the building safety regulator will have to register the building and produce a safety case, but that's coming through the system over the next few months. But in terms of compliance, I'm happy that we're still doing a fantastic job and that we're where we need to be. Everything's 100%.
Sean, can I say part of the I'd like to see this being resolved now, we've got to come to an agreement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in terms of the skilling strategy, yeah, that's been floating around for a while now.
Yeah.
Any else, Jen?
Yeah, can I also note that we need to add environmental onto this and somebody to give Sean a new template as well. So
Yeah.
it gets emptied out and copied across.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, thanks. I'll give that this time round.
No, somebody else will pick it up for you, Sean.
We're not forgetting them.
Right, if no further questions to Sean on that one. Item A8, health and safety update. It says it's you, Maria, but
No, Sean.
sure.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Now at this point, I'd normally regale you with the outcome of the afternoon's health and safety forum meeting. But unfortunately, on this occasion, we've not been able to hold that meeting today as a result of a bit of a mix-up with meetings. Ian and I communicated earlier in the week about this mix-up and agreed that with there being no major items of concern, we're happy to carry that meeting forward through to next time round to make sure that we've got strong attendance, to make sure it's in people's diaries, because that's what makes that forum, the people that attend, from throughout the organisation. Now, at this morning's SMT meeting, we ran through any accidents and incidents and any violence and aggression issues. And again, there's nothing that's untoward or outstanding or major that I need to raise with you guys. So that's the update on health and safety.
Can I ask then where the Telegraph got hold of the story around Milestone House? They've done quite a feature on that today. And although it says at the end of the article that nobody's been physically abused or assaulted, it makes out that there's a serious issue at Milestone that requires 24/7 security guards.
Okay, what I will say in relation to Milestone, Roy, is that every health and safety forum was
Sean, do you want Claire to answer that?
yeah, so it was picked up from my previous board report, which talked about how we manage complex and challenging behaviours and people who are residing in Milestone House. So it was picked up from that board report, and I think largely taken out of context.
Yeah, that doesn't happen, does that?
The reporting.
Thank you, Claire.
Well, thank you. Ian, have you anything to add to what Sean said?
No, Sean and I discussed it, and I'm perfectly happy with what Sean said.
Thank you, Ian. Moving on then, A9, back to you, Michael, operational budget.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is the annual budget second. just before I start in it, I'd like to thank Helen, who's done most of the work on it this time around, and Helen and the team, but I'll present the overview. As in previous years, we've got a detailed budget proposal for next year, and then an outlined forecast for the next 2 years. And over the 3 years, it's continuing the theme or the strategy from the board for us to aim for an underlying break-even budget. So in layman's term, where our income matches our expenditure. If we were to incur some one-off expenditure on items such as depot improvements, which we can't capitalise because we don't own the depot, that will cost us some money in the year and we'll fund it from reserves. But what we're aiming for is for our day-to-day budget to operate on a break-even position. So we've got the proposals in there as well. The report also updates board on the planned use of our reserves, and we've got around £14 million worth of what I call usable reserves. And there's a list down there on where we're prioritising that investment of that cash over the next few years, and also keeping some cash set aside for minimum levels of contingencies. We've also got a cap budget, which includes the proposal for replacement of predominantly vans, and there's a small amount on ground maintenance equipment as well. And there's also a notional budget set aside for acquisition or new build of new homes. But that figure is there for illustration, because the schemes will come forward to board on a scheme by scheme basis as and when opportunities arise. So it's very difficult to put a firm budget on the new builds side. I've also highlighted, and I think it's very important that board note this area around the continued support from Derby Homes for aligned council services that Derby does. We're comfortable that these services are within the objects of Derby Homes, so it's perfectly reasonable that Derby Homes provide services at Milestone House, services like Derby Advice and Housing Options, even though they are not core social housing activities. And also what we're required to do from a regulator's perspective is what's called a stress test on the budget, to basically what would break your budget. And because we're in such a fortunate position in having the cash reserves at the minute, the likelihood of Derby Homes entering into significant financial difficulty is very, very low because of those reserves, and it would give management and the board time to put mitigating measures in place if something financially was to go away. I don't know if there's anything particular anybody wanted to flag up in the actual budgets at all, but I just wanted to highlight one area which is part of section 4.1, where it does include an additional £365,000 worth of saving required, and that's come off the management fee from the council, and that's all part of balance HRA business plan. And I think, well, we discussed this at the previous meeting, but I think what the council have done in setting the HRA business plan is a really good balance between ensuring that there's still budget in place for 100 homes a year in the HRA. There's still £1 million in the HRA for matching toward decarbonisation work, but there is a necessity to save £1 million in the HRA. And to be fair, they've spread it over 3 years. And so the hit to Derby Homes in year one is £365,000. And we're hoping we can find alternative savings in year 2 and 3, so that further saving isn't passed on to Derby Homes in those years. But I think it is important to recognise that there is a management fee reduction included in this year's pressures as well. Happy to take any.
I've got Jen and Lucy.
Shall I start? Two questions. One relates to the information in the table under 4.2, and there's one question: the management fee reduction. I don't think it's included twice from what you've just said, but I wasn't quite sure how it fitted in, because it's there at the bottom of the table, the 365 that you just mentioned, but it's also near the top of the table as well. management fee reduction of 199. So the 199 is for the reduction in properties, presumably, and the 365 is due to the 1 million adjustment over 3 years. Is that right?
Absolutely right. I think you reminded me, it's a very, very important point you've picked up there. The base budget is going to reduce by between 100,000 and probably nearer to £200,000 a year, simply because the housing stock, the 12,500 housing stock, has a reduction on an annual basis because of the high levels of right to buy. And Derby's levels as a percentage of the stock are really high compared to the number of new properties that have come in into stock, and therefore the fee gets reduced accordingly. So just before we even start, we've got to find a couple £100,000 a year to take account of that management fee.
Thank you. The other one I wanted to raise was the legal pressure, legal costs associated with increasing disrepair claims, and I just wondered what was behind that.
Well, over the last year, we've had a huge increased number of damp and disrepair claims, and they, as we've reported to operational board, very roughly the costs that are incurred associated with that, 2/3 of them relating to legal and 1/3 related to compensation to the actual claimant. And the legal budget, which is a combination of the costs from the council and any external legal that we get on those claims, we're having to increase the legal budget to align with the current level of activity in that area.
Can I just add, Lucy, can I just add to that? This is a position that is happening nationally.
Yeah.
It's not that Derby service is seeing us get more legal claims. If we look at the proportion of claims that we get against the total stock, we're actually quite a lot lower than many other parts of the country. And that is in part to the rigorous defence that we, along with legal, put forward. The claims farmers don't see Derby as attractive as other places.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had was about the grounds maintenance equipment that you mentioned. How much grounds maintenance do we do ourselves rather than subcontracting it to the council?
Right, so the actual delivery of the service is done by the Street Pride team, but the capital equipment used by the Street Pride is owned by Derby Homes. So the Street Pride team are using the Derby Homes owned equipment, and it just makes sense for Derby Homes to buy the equipment and pay for it outright and depreciate it in Derby Homes' books, rather than it being a cost incurred by Street Pride and being passed on to Derby Homes and incurring a non-cost.
Okay, who ensures it's being maintained properly to get best value from it in use?
So Street Prides are responsible for the day-to-day maintenance of it, but obviously the managers on the Derby Homes side oversee the general maintenance of the kit used on the contract, and will also be bringing forward recommendations for switching the types of machinery that's being used, again linked to the frequency of the activity of the cuts. So we'll have a bit more detail on that in the operation.
The report that we're going to get in due course.
Yes.
Lovely, thank you.
Jen?
I also wanted to comment on the grounds maintenance because, as you said, £200,000 is quite a lot of money, and considering that we have got green city objectives and we are working towards becoming a carbon neutral organisation, what's the rationale to keep buying petrol mowers that pollute the atmosphere and cut down and reduce biodiversity? And I do appreciate that some areas might need to be cut, but I walked up the road near Kingsway the other day and saw, it was last year, huge swathes of really beautiful wide grass verges that were full of flowers being cut down very short. And they weren't blocking the roadways. I know always there's issues with access in some places, but could we reduce our maintenance, our capital revenue for this area, and be more environmentally friendly by doing perhaps like trimming it by hand, for example, rather than just mowing areas wholesale?
I do know that Richard and the team are considering areas for that type of treatment. where we can effectively rewild it, we'll do it in a managed way.
Yeah.
And there are parts of the city where that's been quite successful.
Yeah.
So I think that's on the agenda.
Cotton
I
Lane.
don't think it gets covered in the report when
Yeah.
it comes back to the end.
Ian,
Just on paragraph 4.3, Chair, on the list of proposed budget savings, I noticed that quite a few of them, the way we're going to achieve the saving is to get the council to pay the amount of money involved by recharging them or by deflecting charges to the council. I just wonder if the council was aware of this and there had been amicable discussions on this.
They are now, Ian.
Yeah, the council is aware of this, and we have discussed this for a long period of time at the HRA Capital Board, and it's got to a stage where Derby Homes can't afford to run a development team without passing the cost on when it's working on council schemes, and on the management of the HRA Capital Programme, that's the cyclical major work side of the capital programme. As you can imagine, there are recharge methodologies which recharges X, and there's recharge methodologies that recharge Y, and we're saying that it's fair to relook at these recharge methodologies, and that would generate extra income into Derby Homes. You're quite correct, it will incur an extra cost on the HRA capital programme, but in the profiling that we've done on the wider HRA capital programme, apologies to go to technicalities, but if you recall the discussion we had at the last meeting around asset componentisation, those component costs and those depreciation periods factored in an anticipated increase in the management fee, if you like, of managing those capital programmes. So although we've not got it through yet, the revised mechanisms, I'm confident that the council's HRA capital programme can accommodate these proposed revised recharge methods.
Thank you.
Well, and Ian's fully aware of them.
Yeah, as Michael was saying,
Oh, no.
I don't think we've been discussing for quite a while.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else, Michael?
No, obviously there's a lot of detail in these reports. The recommendations are all there. If everybody's happy with the recommendations, great. Again, on the capital, just to add to Sean's point earlier, 40 vans, petrol stroke diesel type, we want to set aside £1 million for it. That's an average of 25,000 a van. Depending on the age of the van, that might be a bit on the short side. I can reassure the board that we will still be maintaining our 7-year depreciation policy on vans. What we won't get with a 3-year-old van is this massive saving we're getting currently on depreciation, because when we bought new in the last 11 years, etc., they'll probably get written off over the 7 years. So you buy second hand, but they obviously won't last as long at the back end.
And you are happy that the bit we lose at the back end is more than compensated from the what we save at the front end?
It is, and it's not just, I think it's, I know we focus on the cash, but operationally it's not great if the van's off the road and we're having to get higher vans in to cover it whilst it's in things. We've got to consider the capacity over at the Stores Road depot as well to manage all these vans as well. I'm not saying that they're all breaking down, but there's an efficiency gain in ensuring that the vans are on the road virtually all the time, and just to assure you that some of the better older vans we will keep as pool vans, so when vans do go in for routine MOTs and servicing etc., we'll be using those pool vans rather than having to hire vans in.
Thank you, Michael. There are a number of recommendations listed in paragraph 2. Do we approve those? Yep. Oh, Lucy.
Yeah, it's not something, it's just the appendix giving all the detailed cost centres. Can we make sure that next time we have this printed in a way that's easier to read, so it's all on one sheet rather than split sideways? Does that make sense?
We'll take that on board. It's always very difficult, isn't it, to do that. So we'll have a look at the formatting.
It will mean it'll mean the text has to be slightly smaller, but that's easier than having to try and put 2 virtual sheets next to each other.
Yes, I'll take that on board. I think when we as accountants do it as a spreadsheet and it looks fine, we don't realise what it looks like when it goes to the PDF.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're having a new financial management system from April. Maybe that will help us present it in a different way.
Okay, no, I'm not going to say that. I wouldn't hold my breath yet. Okay. Carrying on with your Michael, procurement policy and strategy review.
Yes, well, this is why Andrew's here today. I just wanted to introduce it really. As board members will have recalled from the training session we had before the meeting started, we're actually looking to update this strategy now because it was last done in 2020, but it's quite likely that it's going to tweak again in a year or so's time when we get the changes through from government and on the procurement rules. But I'll hand over to Andrew now anyway, as he's the one who's drafted this particular report, just to talk us through it, or just go straight to queries if people wanted to do that. Is there anything else you wanted to specifically pick out on this one, Andrew?
The unfortunate misspelling of strategy.
We realise that spell check doesn't check things when everything's in capitals, so that's a learning thing for us all.
So we've split these into the two documents rather than trying to blend them into one, recognising that although we review them at least once every 3 years, some of these will be reviewed sooner. Policy does state plans needed to consider the corporate objectives around and review the standing orders. Specific reference to social value strategy is made. It does mention sustainability. I note that the report itself doesn't say environmental as such, but we are fully aware that when some of the changes to the regulations expected this year come in, there will be some instructions around aspects of equalities and environment. So we might need to look at strategies, policies, or additional content within these then. I only particularly wanted to highlight that some of the points we're proposing around monitoring compliance and effectiveness are content that may or may not be within the regulations when they come in, but we think will be beneficial. For example, arranging a pipeline of anticipated procurements for the next 18 to 24 months to help us. At the moment, we flag up to heads of service in procurement when things are coming up, but an 18 to 24 month plan will take some time to develop, but might help with some of that forward planning and managing where we're going with projects. So any questions or concerns?
Lucy.
I managed that badly. My apologies. The in the strategy document, it refers to the way in which we buy services. This is the top. Sorry, no page numbers. It's under the heading saying procurement framework. And it says Derby Homes is open-minded about the way services are procured. I think it should be full stop, and these are either with national buying consortia. And I think it just should say buying consortia, because as we had in the training earlier, it was talking about some of these being local, regional or national. And I think it's just to tidy that bit up.
Okay.
And I wondered whether there needed to, we ever do stuff not just in our own teams, but also with Derby City Council. I know their procurement team's a bit thin at the moment, but over the next 3 years, it says jointly with others, and that might cover with that. But whether we wanted to specifically mention,
we do, Lucy. We do procure with the council wherever it's sensible, and
the reason for the definition.
Sorry, it's already there. It's point 2, and I shouldn't have noted it down in my notes. It's
their definition. I can't comment on them being short, having left them to come.
That's fine. I'm not blaming you at all. Do you want me to pick up the policy document at the same time?
Why not?
Yeah, please.
Because this refers quite often to head of service managers. And I think it's a bit, first time I thought, what on earth are we talking about? And then as I read on, I think it's a bit tautological, that we either mean heads of service or we mean service managers. rather than heads of service managers, which is a bit of a mouthful. It comes up several times.
I think we just need to have a look at that, Lucy, because it can be heads of service and service managers who are not always the same people.
No.
So because the managers, ultimately it's the contract manager, the authorised employee, if you like, of the contract may not always be reporting directly to head of service for the approval. It depends on the value of the contract.
Okay, so it may be heads of service or service managers. I'll leave somebody to talk out the technicalities of that. Just at the moment it seemed a bit of a mouthful.
Could
and this is
a slash.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Why not? Why not?
Yeah. And this is where I was going to mention that the council's got a new procurement software which they're just beginning to like. So maybe something to look out for.
There is an element within the strategy document that is considering that, because that's where we bring in the forms rather than standing orders and the way we might be changing some content of those effectively to move into the platform.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Okay, Ian.
I wanted to speak on the procurement policy document. Is that okay at this stage?
Yeah, yes.
Yep. So on page 2 of the procurement policy document, at the bottom of the page, there's a number of key terms and definitions. The second one, it says contract procedure rules, the written rules which regulate the procurement processes and procedures at Derby City Council. Should that be Derby Homes?
No. So what we refer to as procurement standing orders at Derby Homes, the council has all their document, the contract
procedure rules. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's okay. And I just also wanted to draw attention, Chair, on page 4 of that same document, on paragraph 5, halfway down the page, second paragraph down there. I think there's a very good paragraph there, outlining that failure to anticipate the need for a procurement of any services and/or works or to allow sufficient time for scrutiny and approval is not a reason to avoid good procurement practice. I completely agree with that. And the point I was trying to make earlier in the when Andrew was speaking earlier is that if everyone does that and sort of does things in the appropriate time, I don't think there'll be too many problems with needs for the same volume of need for waiver of standing orders because things are too late.
That's some of our thinking behind the pipeline of anticipated procurements at the top of page 6.
Yeah.
Some of that is that regulations might enforce that into certain audiences, but it's still not exactly determined in the regs. But I don't think it's at all a bad idea to have it operating within Derby Homes itself.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any further comments? Can we approve those then? Thank you. A11 then, Untitled Digital Strategy.
Yes, again, although I'm bringing the paper, I just want to thank the people who've been involved in this. Claire's had a strong involvement. Tony Gordon from our IT project team, and in particular Holly Johnson from the customer engagement team has been effectively leading on this. And Jen's made helpful comments as we've gone along, and I don't know how many different versions we've had. Finally, we've brought them forward to the board, and the board may recall that we did present them back in July 21 and asked us to have a fresh look at it again. And I'm not going to go through it in detail, but I just wanted to give an overview of the theme that we're trying to put forward on this is that we are looking and we're going to have to bring in the benefits of digitalisation and automation to a certain extent into our services to supplement our existing service provision in those areas. So as the board are aware, we're going to be introducing web chat and web bots over the next few months alongside the council. We've got similar timescales on this, but we will still have a contact centre for those who don't do that self-service type of contact. And there will be numerous examples where we are looking to take the benefits of digitisation forward. And we've just like given another example on that with the procurement portal that we're looking to do on the SharePoint one. We've got a new financial management system coming in. There's going to be a lot of automation in that, which will remove needs from spreadsheets. So the direction of travel is to take advantage of the digital opportunities that are out there going forward, but not to. We need to be mindful that not all of our customers, our tenants, will be able to access those. We're on about expanding the range of accessing to our services. Any queries on that particular theme before I go on to the pledge that we're looking to align with the government on that?
Roy, just a quick one, and going back to the budget, there's a line in the budget that says removal of one-off funding for web chat implementation.
Yeah.
So does that complement what we're trying to do in the digital strategy?
Absolutely. In 23-24, there's £50,000 set aside for the implementation of the web chat, web bot software, effectively, and that money then comes out the following year after we've incurred that initial setup cost. And so that is an investor save type of area, because we do think, as you will be aware, the council have got significant savings aligned to this type of area as well. And although we haven't put anywhere near the level of savings into our forecast associated with this, we do believe there will be productivity gains as a result of this if we implement it appropriately. So we've got time to do it, and then we'll see what the benefits are once it's been implemented. But yes, it includes an element of one-off funding that comes out the following year.
Okay. Lucy?
Thank you. Just under purpose in the strategy document 2.1, it says this document will be reviewed every 3 years. And I think from what you've already said, this document will be reviewed at least every 3 years. That's the sort of backstop figure. So it's a very minor change, but I just think for accuracy. The other thing in my reading of the document that's not picked up is recognising the carbon footprints of digital, and that's both the hardware and the software, and to seek to minimise these without reducing the practical effectiveness of our services. And I think that probably needs to be in there somewhere.
Can I pick that up rather than?
I think Jen wants to answer that one.
Yeah.
No, sorry, it wasn't. It was a separate comment on it.
Okay. Just on that, I take it on board. We've not got there, but I think we have actually got a detailed action plan behind this, but it deliberately wasn't attached to this because I didn't want to be too prescriptive at this stage, and that the long-term disposal aspect of the hardware in particular is considered. And there's already a plan to tackle that a lot. Basically, we're doing what the council is in repurposing the laptops in particular wherever possible. What we haven't done, if I'm honest, is we haven't considered the impact of the electricity used in the servers or anything like that to run everything in the background. We haven't done that.
And that, through you, Chair, is why part of the strategy needs to include, not just the waste aspects or the materials usage, but the usage of the whole system. That whenever a customer or tenant goes online and they use the service, they are adding to the footprint that Derby Homes has to own, because if our website was not there, they would not be going online and using it. So it's not just the hardware that we've got, but it's also the software and the way our website works that we need to be mindful of. And that's why it's part of the strategy.
I take it on board, but I'm not aware how we could quantify that or evaluate that or compare it against other mechanisms of contacts in the carbon footprints associated.
There are companies who do that.
Is it not just possible to track the electricity usage from the servers?
I don't think we know, Jen. We'd have to we have to go have a look into that. It's kind of taking it on to the next stage.
We've got to appreciate that these servers host hundreds of companies, and you wouldn't be able to
break out
the Derby Homes.
Like our main hosting centre that
No,
the
it's
council
fine.
has, but
To be honest with you, I would actually, if you're interested in it, I'd go and speak to your server company, because the maintenance of the environments the servers need to be maintained in are incredibly fine tuned, and they might be able to give you information around that, even if it's just, you know, I would imagine the Derby Homes website, if there's probably got to have, they probably would be able to give you some information, even if it's just a bit of figure out.
I think what I'd like to do is take these comments away, because I think they're incredibly valuable, but we need to build it in at the right point. We've only got so many resources. I know it seems like we're a big company, but we're not resource rich. I would like to be able to really put our energies into some of the key things within this document, particularly around the skills audit of our staff. Do people know how to use what we've already got? It would be so much better if they did. But I think they're really valuable comments, and we can take them away.
Yes, sure.
Two things I wanted to contribute at this stage following the work that I was involved in. The digital strategy still doesn't talk about evaluation as far as I can see, and I don't know if that's coming out in the specific plans, but digital moves so quickly, you have to evaluate and you have to set your KPIs and evaluation means and methods before you start rolling anything out, and I just wanted to raise that. The other one is as well is that I don't know if I apologise if this is inappropriate, but I've worked in digital for 10 years and I'm involved in digital research, and the life cycle between research and technology coming to market and widespread adoption is getting faster and faster. And if I were you, I would recommend that the board reviews the digital strategy at least every 12 months, because the problem you've got is that as an internal, when you're looking internally in an organisation, it's very easy to miss something about a change coming. Who would have spotted the energy hikes, for example, and then realised that we should have reviewed the digital strategy and we didn't, and we've incurred a penalty or a difficulty. Things are moving so fast, we could really miss something quite serious.
Yeah, I suppose I just want to reflect how far I think we've travelled from the first strategy that we had 12 months ago, the one that we're bringing here today. And I think the points that are raised by Lucy and Eugen are almost the next iteration on. I think that we need to, you know, we've pulled ourselves somewhere into the 21st century in terms of our approach. We've got to work through an action plan that gets us to where our aspiration is.
We're still working our way to ground zero, effectively, aren't we?
Yeah, and I would have I've got a nervousness about putting more into the strategy, and also the review period, because I think if we were to bring it back in a year's time, I suspect that we will still be trying to action the content in this document to a large degree. So I just wondered the value of bringing it more frequently.
So maybe what I'm talking about then isn't so much a review of the strategy document itself, but actually where we are in the strategy, because
an update.
Sorry. So just to pick that up, that's what I was getting at, rather than reviewing the document.
I think to bring the action plan, that would be.
I think you might have picked up that it's deliberately vague, because some of the headings of the table is what we will work towards, and even though we've got a bit more detail behind that, I think what we perhaps ought to do is give an update on these what we will work towards aspirations and see how far we've progressed. Obviously, we will be working alongside the council on these, and the council has its own priorities on what areas it wishes to devote its time to, and we are likely we are going to be guided a lot by the council. Now, a lot of these are going to be aligned with what the councils are, because obviously they're going down the route of self-service wherever possible, and you know we will be able to go on the back of that. and within our own areas where we have got control, particularly on the open housing side, we are looking to improve accessibility for tenants in particular to make repairs online, etc. As part of that. So I take on board that perhaps an annual update on what we will work towards, and that will include some horizon scanning on what's on the what's coming up, because I think we all use the gov.uk website and really like the user friendliness of that. And there is a long-term aspiration for what's called like a singles tell us once effectively sign on. So, you know, at the minute, you've got to sign into a Derby Homes website, you've got to sign into a council one, you've got to sign into any government one. Eventually, they want these single signers to speak to each other, so one person can go in across the board. And I think these are the things that are coming down the line, but we don't want to be too prescriptive because we just don't know when we can actually deliver them. But there are things which will improve accessibility and the user experience further down the line.
Yeah.
So taking all that on board, I think there is still a danger in using ambiguous language in strategy documents, though, in giving ourselves the space, for want of a better word, because we're working with Derby Homes and we don't quite know what we're doing. Going back to how we manage risk, where we've got we use like a traffic light system, which is red, amber, green. You know, what we could do is we could assign traffic light systems, have a specific targeted and measurable outcome or objective, and then use something like the traffic light system to actually identify how far we are towards achieving that. And in the same way with the traffic light system finance, sometimes there are mitigating circumstances, and sometimes there's nothing we can do them about. But I'm just very cautious about ambiguous language, because room for ambiguity also gives room for missing things. Yeah, so I think for clarity, that the action plan that will sit underneath the strategy will have clear, definable outcomes and objectives, and we can absolutely collate that into progress, and we can bring exception reports. I think you will get the assurance that which I think we will be seeking, that we're making progress towards the digital intent that sits within the strategy. I suppose the point that I was trying to make was that we don't stretch our digital intent in terms of moving our strategy on so far that we can't
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Lucy.
I wanted to check that we can put into our action plan the targets about energy efficiency without having it written into the strategy document. Because if it's not going to be remembered for the plan, then we need to make sure it's in the strategy.
We can include it, but you will appreciate that the provision of the IT infrastructure is provided by Derby City Council, which is then provided by God knows whatever servers in the background, and we're going to have virtually zero control over what environmental considerations those server hosting companies have. I'm guessing they're in the UK or wherever they're, they're going to have to be in the UK. They're going to have. So I'm nervous to put that in because I don't got any control over it.
Well, we have control over the way we design our website. So, for example, a very simple thing: if you put up a picture which somebody downloads, the higher resolution of that picture that they've downloaded as something they've looked at, just by looking at it on their screen, they've downloaded it onto their laptop screen. But if it's a higher resolution picture, there's more data that's had to be transferred, and therefore it's taken more energy to transfer onto their laptop screen. So every time that picture is downloaded, you're increasing a higher resolution picture, increases the amount of energy used by the website user.
Okay.
So we've got control over that as to what we put up there.
Absolutely, but there are standards So any web image should be 72 dpi, which is the web standard, for exactly that reason. And if we're not doing that kind of thing, you need to be
frankly, no one does your website because
Yeah.
it's, unless there's a specific thing, if it's, you know, a high-res image for a specific purpose, but there should be that there are industry standards, Lucy, that should take.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think what we should have in the action plan is to apply best practice to how we not design, how we deliver our website.
Absolutely is design, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
But the purpose for following those best practice is partly to do with the energy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good.
It does mention energy use in our delivery, but it's just I want to make sure it gets into the action plan.
Well, I think we've noted that, then, Lisa. Thank you.
Well, I've just got one final comment, and all this technology stuff and all the different things you're saying, it's gone over my head, but I will get there. But I think Michael makes a very valid point at the beginning of the conversation, in that we mustn't lose sight of the customers who are not digitally advanced. And the thing here is, it's so easy to lose sight of them. So please, I would like the assurance that these customers who cannot use the online services are not forgotten.
Yeah.
So just to answer, so in the work I did find somebody living with a disability, and I hope Claire would second this, like the needs of people who struggle with access, financial reasons, affluence, language, physical impairments, any kind of reason really, it was front and centre right the way through. You know, I was, you know, that was something that is always really important to me about accessibility, you know, across the whole organisation.
I was just going to say there's a really good equality impact assessment as part of the appendix as well. So yeah.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
So
Lucy, is your hand still up, or? Okay.
So,
yeah.
I'd actually just wanted to thank the Derby Homes team because it was the first. I'm a fair noob really in terms of being a board member. I think I've only been here 3 years, and the team in Derby Homes that worked with me and my first approach to Claire was incredibly well received, and I thoroughly enjoyed the work. And I just wanted to thank them for taking it on board. It was really lovely being able to get into the operational side. And I just wanted to express thanks.
Thank you for saying that. And I know that's mutual. They also appreciate it.
Absolutely.
There was a second part to the recommendation as well, and this is for Derby Homes to follow the council's lead in signing up to the Deluxe digital intention aspiration. And really that is like a benchmark to say that we would be looking to set our services up or design our services in line with best practice, which again, I think, as it says in there, there's 272 public sector signatories to it already, and it would make sense for us to follow those best practice guidelines as well.
Okay. Yep. I think that's fairly uncontentious. I think we'll agree to that. Okay. Do we accept both those recommendations? Okay. Right. Over to you, Claire. Tenancy policy.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper just seeks for the board to approve minor amendments to the Derby Homes tenancy policy. So this is in relation to Derby Homes owned properties. And it really just picks up 2 areas that in terms of practice that we haven't previously written in when the paper was brought to you for approval back in March 2022. The 2 minor amendments are to include demoted tenancies within the tenancy policy. We list out all the types of tenancies that might be used either by Derby Homes in relation to Derby Homes as properties, but also reflects the types of tenancies that we use to manage the council's tenancies on their behalf. And we admitted the option of demoted tenancies. Even though we don't use them, it is an option available to us, and in order to ensure that we could use them in the future if we wanted to, we need to include them in the policy document. And the second is really just to bring our working practice in line with the Civil Partnership Regulation of 2019 into that policy document. So not to say that we haven't been following the regulation, it's just that we don't have it recognised in our policy document at the moment. We took the minor amendments to the operational board back in December, and there's a slight typo, 4.3, it should say 2022, not 2023. And the operational board recommended approval of the minor amendments, but we had brought it here initially for approval, so brought it back in terms of those minor amendments.
Bob.
Chair, I'm just under paragraph 11. You're probably laughing when I say it. 11.1, it says when the tenant dies. Is there any other sort of software that could work that?
Passes away.
Deceased. I just think it's a bit of a harsh. I know it's the reality and it happens.
When a tenant passes.
No, I don't think so, because that doesn't read properly, because it says then the tenancy could be passed. We can't use passed in two different ways.
When a tenant's deceased.
Deceased.
Yeah, something just a bit of a softer touch.
I can change that word.
Yeah.
I hadn't picked up on that before, you know.
Do that. We'll pick that up in the
I
next.
know it's reality, people can pass away, but I think we need a document. It's just a soft, it's a softer.
Do we accept those?
Could we just say if a tenant dies? Rather than when, it's when seems.
It's when, I think.
But if under circumstances, if a tenant dies, a tenancy can be passed on.
I think deceased.
I think they're immaterial really to the main thrust of changes.
Okay. Can we approve this and move on?
Yes.
Thank you. Right. A13, my report, board member appraisals, as it said here, say this year, last year was it was the chair's appraisal. I was appraised by Bob and Lucy, and then I did appraisals of the chairs. The report says here, that says what we generally felt that the board does well, and what can be done better. I think the only major thing or two things to come out here. One was that there were comments that the form we were using was needed updating, and I know Jane has looked at that and consulted on that, and there are some changes that will be brought forward into that. The other one is again on what the board could do better. Better use of training. Governance training was requested. Again, talking to Jane, she would like to put on some governance training before the May board, and would appreciate any comments of what specifically on governance that people would like to look at. Is that fair, Jane?
Yes, if you could send anything through to me that is of particular interest, and then Taryn and I can build that into the training.
Yeah, okay, right.
Chair, can I just make a point?
Yes.
I think the board is still failing on 0.2 under 4.6.
I second that.
If it was a school report, it would say must try harder.
Yeah, okay. Fair comment.
On that point, I think you better suspend standing orders, Chair.
Yes, I know, yeah.
Yeah, police sets themselves a low standard which consistently fails to maintain.
Couldn't resist that one. And it may be a reason for 0.3 under 4.6.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
They don't know.
They don't know. And just like you could promise today, so it's only 2 days. We could promise it's only 2 hours.
It was a genius move.
Yeah. So I've picked up Ian's comment. Can we suspend standing orders to allow this meeting to finish?
Yeah.
Thank you. Moving on then, the forward plan there is for noting.
Yeah, can I apologise for the formatting on that before anybody else raises it?
It's not too bad on mine.
Well, mine's bloody awful. It's got no title, it's got nothing.
Oh, no.
But we need to go for consistency.
Yes, consistency, yes. And A15 disclosure under the Insurance Act, again.
Yeah, it's just for noting, but we are going through the annual renewal process at the minute. So if board members are aware of anything that management team aren't aware of, please tell me, because I need to factor it into the insurance.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Michael. That ends the open part of the meeting. So